Welcome to this TourAI podcast.
Glad to be here. We've got a really interesting journey to talk about today.
Absolutely. We're embarking on a deep dive into the world of Sri Lankan train travel, specifically that famous Main Line route, the one from Colombo up into the highlands.
Right. And for this, we've pulled together quite a bit of material. We've got a DW documentary transcript, a guide from Something of Freedom on public transport there.
There was a Reddit thread too, right? On the Kandy to Ella train.
Yeah, that one. Plus historical stuff from Sri Lanka Railways itself, Salt in Our Hair on the Nine Arch Bridge, a BBC travel piece, and practical tips from Seat 61. So a good mix.
Okay, so our mission here is really to unpack this whole experience for you. We want to go beyond just, the amazing scenery and understand the history, how to actually do the trip.
And what people who've done it actually think.
Yeah.
The real story.
Exactly. Okay, so this Main Line, it gets described as like one of the most beautiful railway journeys in the world. That DW documentary really paints a picture. What makes it so special?
Well, it's partly the history, I think. It wasn't always about the views. The Sri Lanka Railways info tells us the first bit opened way back in 1864.
1864, wow.
Yeah, and its main job then, not passengers admiring tea fields, but hauling coffee down from the hills to Colombo for export.
Coffee, right. I read about that. So before the tea, it was coffee country.
Exactly. And then, as Something of Freedom mentions, this coffee blight hit hard around 1871, wiped out the coffee industry, basically.
Which must have been devastating economically.
Oh, absolutely. But it kind of paved the way for tea. The Sri Lanka Railways history shows that the shift to tea in the 1880s really pushed the railway construction further deeper into the highlands.
So the railway expanded because of tea.
Pretty much. They needed to get the tea out, but also get workers and equipment in. It really shows how, economics drives infrastructure.
But building it wasn't easy, was it? That DW documentary.
Yeah.
It mentioned some pretty harsh conditions for the workers.
Yeah, really tough. Huge loss of life, apparently. Thousands died from malaria, cholera, diseases like that. It puts a different perspective on those amazing bridges and tunnels.
It really does. You think about the human effort behind it all. The BBC travel article points out this was fundamentally a colonial project, right? Built for resource extraction, not scenic tours.
Precisely. The British influence is clear. That Colombo Fort Station, the DW dock, notes it was modeled on Victoria Station in Manchester. It's a very visible link to that colonial past.
So fast forward to today. Freight, as the DW dock says, is tiny now, like 1% on the rails. But for passengers, especially tourists, this line is huge.
It's had a complete transformation in its role, from purely functional moving goods to this major global tourist attraction.
Which is fascinating, how infrastructure can find a whole new life.
It really highlights that adaptability. Its purpose just evolved over time with changing economies and, well, the rise of travel.
Okay, let's get into the ride itself. That Colombo to Ella stretch, Something of Freedom calls it one of Asia's most stunning. It's about 270 kilometers.
Around that, yeah. And what's amazing is the change in scenery. You start near Colombo, it's pretty flat.
Right.
Then, as the DW documentary describes, you start climbing through Kandy up into the highlands, and the landscape just gets more and more dramatic: ravines, gorges, tunnels.
It's a serious climb.
Yeah.
I think the documentary said what took 12 days by ox cart back then is now, 9 hours by train?
Something like that, yeah. A huge difference. And you feel the climate change, too, as you go up. Kandy's already cooler, around 500 meters elevation.
That shift in altitude, the changing views, that must be a big part of the appeal.
Definitely. It's like several journeys in one, which is why it sticks with people.
Okay, so along this route, key stops. Kandy seems like a big one. The DW doc mentions its history as the last Sinhalese capital, a center of culture.
It's hugely significant culturally, historically, and of course, it has the Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic, the Sri Lankan.
That's the most important Buddhist relic in Sri Lanka, right?
Yeah.
UNESCO site.
Exactly. The DW doc highlights that. The daily rituals there, the pujas, they're central to the country's spiritual life. It's quite something to witness.
And it's not just history. There are those Kandian dance performances, too.
The documentary shows them. A really vibrant tradition going back centuries. So yeah, Kandy offers a lot right there on the line.
Then you move into the famous tea country. The BBC piece emphasized how vital the railway was for developing all those plantations.
It was absolutely crucial. The scale is immense. The DW doc says over 2,200 square kilometers of tea. The railway was the artery, getting the tea out, getting supplies, and people in.
And they talk about what makes Ceylon tea special, too.
Yeah, the young leaves, the chemistry, it's all part of the story. And a key station here is Nanu Oya. Both the doc and the Reddit thread mention it.
That's the stop for Nuwara Eliya, the sort of Little England.
Right, but you need to transfer from Nanu Oya station to get to Nuwara Eliya town itself. The train doesn't go right there anymore.
Gotcha. And then there's Patapola, highest station in Sri Lanka.
Yep, 1891 meters up. And the DW doc notes it's significant as a station on a broad gauge railway.
Okay, broad gauge. What does that mean for the average person? Why mention it?
Well, broad gauge just means the tracks are wider apart than standard gauge. For this line, it meant more stability, bigger trains, heavier loads essential for hauling all that tea, and later passengers up those steep hills. Patapola being the highest point on that kind of robust system is, well, it's an engineering feat.
Makes sense. And finally, the train rolls into Ella. BBC Travel described it going from a quiet village to a real tourist hub.
Largely because of the scenery and, of course, that bridge.
Ah, yes, the Nine-Arch Bridge. Salt in Our Hair had great details. 30 meters high, all stone, local materials, built when steel was scarce. It looks incredible.
It really does, just blends into the hills. And that Kandy to Ella section, like they say, everyone seems to agree it's one of the world's most beautiful train rides. And surprisingly cheap, too, according to Something of Freedom.
Incredible value. Oh, and the Demodara loop. That BDC piece explained it well, that spiral track to handle a steep bit.
Yeah. It's genius engineering. And the story about it being inspired by a local worker's turban, that just adds a lovely touch, doesn't it? Makes it more human.
It really does.
Yeah.
Okay, practical stuff now. For anyone thinking, right, I want to do this, classes of travel, Something of Freedom, and Seat 61 laid out first, second, third class.
Yeah, the main differences are comfort, whether you get a reserved seat, and price, obviously. First class is top comfort, guaranteed seat, often AC.
Probably best for longer stretches if you want comfort.
Could be. Second class reserved is a popular choice. Decent comfort, reserved seat costs less. Third class is the budget option, mostly unreserved benches. Can get crowded, but it's, the most local experience, perhaps.
And reservations seem key, especially Kandy to Ella.
Definitely recommended for first and second. Something of Freedom stresses that. Seat 61 explains you can book online via agents or the official railway site, or often cheaper at the station up to 30 days ahead.
Good tip. And there are different types of trains, too. Old brown ones, newer blue ones.
The DW dock and Seat 61 mention that. The older ones have character. The newer Chinese-built blue ones are more modern, comfortable.
And BBC mentioned a special tourist train, the Ella Odyssey.
Yeah, that's relatively new. Designed for tourists, apparently it stops specifically at scenic spots for photos. Might appeal to some.
The lays. That Reddit thread was pretty clear about that. One person's 6.5-hour trip became 10 hours.
Oof, yeah, it happens. Single track sections, other holdups. Something of Freedom also mentions this, suggests maybe trying for express trains if possible. Basically, build in some buffer time, don't have a tight connection.
Good advice. Patience is required. What about getting the best photos, the best views?
General advice, like from Seat 61 and BBC, is sit on the right side, heading from Colombo towards Kandy and the hills.
Right side for the best views.
Got it. And everyone talks about the open windows and doors being part of it. Great for photos, feeling the breeze. But obviously, be careful.
Yeah, Seat 61 is clear on safety. No leaning way out, especially near bridges or tunnels. And definitely don't walk on the tracks.
Common sense, really. Oh, and food, best to bring your own snacks and drinks. Onboard options might be limited or not what you expect.
Right. So hearing from actual travelers on that Reddit thread, despite the frustration with delays for some.
The overwhelming vibe was positive, wasn't it?
Okay.
Especially the value. People mentioned reserved seats costing just a few dollars. It's incredible, really.
It is astounding value. And some useful tips came out of that, too. Like starting the scenic bit at Nanaoya if you're short on time.
Yeah, that concentrates the wow moments into a shorter trip. And checking times, expecting delays that came up again and again. Oh, and someone mentioned using Uber in the bigger towns was easy for getting around.
Useful to know.
Yeah.
Looking ahead now, the future of this line. The DW documentary floated the idea of it becoming a UNESCO heritage railway. What does that mean?
Well, it would definitely raise its profile even higher, could bring in funding for preservation, which is important. But as the doc pointed out, the challenge is balancing that tourism potential with keeping it running as a vital service for local people.
Right. It still needs to be a functional railway for Sri Lankans, not just a tourist ride.
Exactly. Finding that balance is key for its future, making sure it serves everyone.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up for you, the listener. This deep dive, it really shows the Colombo to Ella train is, well, it's way more than just transport. It's history on wheels, culture, amazing scenery, kind of the spirit of Sri Lanka in a way.
Yeah, and what's really striking is, okay, yes, there might be delays, you need to plan a bit, but almost everyone says it's unforgettable. The value is incredible. The views are just world class. From those old colonial stations through the misty tea fields to seeing that nine-arch bridge, every bit tells a story.
So if you're thinking about your own travel plans,
Yeah.
maybe you love history, maybe you just want incredible views, or maybe you want a taste of local life, this railway journey seems to offer something unique. You just need to think, okay, what's my travel style? Am I okay with things maybe not running perfectly to schedule, or do I need that predictability?
Thank you for joining us on this TourAI podcast deep dive. And as you think about your own travels, maybe consider this. Beyond getting those perfect photos, what deeper connection could you make? What could you understand about a country by just slowing down and experiencing it at the pace of its railways?
Thank you for listening to this TourAI podcast.